This 1963 Stingray has had a very, very interesting life. The car started its life in a highly modified fashion for a very special race they made at Daytona Speedway in February of 1963. The car was built by Mickey Thompson. It was raced by Junior Johnson. It was a GM factory entry. Everything about it was experimental. It was intended to be a prototype, and by all means, it was a prototype. And I'd like to point out some of the special features of the car and let you have a look and see for yourself how truly unique this car is. The car was built to Grand National stock car specifications. If it were an Impala, you would say, ah yes, I've seen this before. They took every trick that they learned and everything that they modified on an Impala, and they embraced it in this car. So the very unusual thing for a sports car is to have a full NASCAR roll cage in it. This cage is what you would affectionately call a 6-point cage, but it has a very special brace that goes from the center of the car down to the right front wheel to support the car on the high banking at Daytona. In NASCAR, they modify the exhaust systems and they modify the frames so that the bottom of the car can be as flat as possible. They cut the floors out of this car and replaced the floors with aluminum panels so that they could tuck the exhaust very tightly up underneath. They replaced the factory seats with very special lightweight fiberglass bucket seats. They replaced the instrument cluster and the glove box with flat sheets of aluminum. Replaced all the instruments, the factory instruments, with special Stewart Warner gauges, only for racing. All of the interior is as light as possible, but very oddly, they left carpet in it. Something that is totally unexplainable and something we can't, remains a mystery. We don't know why that is. The interior features of this NASCAR Corvette are pure race car. While there still remains the standard instrument panel from the standard stock Corvette, the glove box has been removed and replaced by a thin aluminum panel. The instrument cluster has been removed and replaced by a thin aluminum panel. And the gauges have been changed only to use the gauges that were necessary for racing. Oddly enough, the car retains its stock Corvette ignition switch, and on this side of the dash is a special switch that turns on a differential pump that pumps oil through the differential and cools it. The center cluster, which used to contain a clock and the radio, has been also covered with a thin aluminum plate. Now that we're inside the car, you can see the special roll cage very clearly. This is the brace that was used to support the right front corner, very specially designed to operate on the high banks of Daytona. The steering wheel has been taped with electrical tape, and so that the diameter of it's made thicker so it's easier for the driver to grip. Mandated by NASCAR safety is this special pad that was affixed to the center of the steering wheel so that if there was a severe frontal impact, that the driver's chest would be protected. Interior space also occupies a special fuel tank. They built a custom tank. Rumor has it that it's about 50 gallons in capacity. The tank is vented. It's got a reserve portion on it that extends down into the wheel, the rear seat area where the wheel would be. As far as the body goes, it appears to be a very standard, very stock Stingray Corvette. However, the car was built in what I've been told to be the basement. I'm not exactly sure what that means, and I'm not exactly sure where that basement is, But from what I understand, the body was hand-laid fiberglass to minimize weight and maximize its performance capability. The hand-laid glass was extremely light and created a very lightweight vehicle, which ended up being offset by the installation of an experimental 427 Chevrolet V8 engine. The engine, rumors have it that they may have made 9 of those engines. Some people say they made 17. Other people say they made 42. We don't know how many of these special engines were made, but we know that there are casting numbers on these engines that indicate that the engine was built in about November of '62. Plexiglass windows were installed so that they minimize weight and maximize performance. The addition of these special clips to hold the windshield in that is done because they were concerned about the flexible nature of the glass and the fact that the glass might actually blow out under high speed. Corvette suspension was left in place. The upper and lower control arms were used. However, they were modified exactly as NASCAR specifications. They added 2 shock absorbers per wheel, so this car had a total of 8 shock absorbers on it, which is extremely unusual for a sports car. This is not the way you build a sports car, but we have to keep in mind that this car was going to race in a NASCAR race on the oval and only on the oval. It wasn't built for any other purpose. So moving forward and talking about suspension, another very unique function of this car is the front sway bar. The front sway bar is particularly unique to NASCAR. It's a solid 1.25 inch bar that has splined ends with 2 large arms that go aft and are connected to the front control arms with heim joints, special heim joints, so that they can be adjusted. They wanted to preload the front sway bar so that it would actually level the car out once it got on the banking. You're keeping in mind that this car was turning 163 mile-an-hour laps, which meant that it was probably up close to 180 on the straightaways. This car was really moving fast. In the rear, the shock absorbers were found up inside the cockpit. There was a special relief made in the fuel tank to accommodate the shock absorbers. They came almost up to the bottom of this window. Very unusual. In order to accommodate quick pit stops and add and replenish fuel, they took the typical Stingray fuel door away and left only direct access to the fuel cap. So all they had to do was remove the cap and take their fuel cans, dump the fuel real quickly, step away, and off the car went. Another unique detail, and something that we haven't quite figured out, was the unusual removal of the taillights. This car had the taillights removed. Obviously, somebody said, well, now you've got to have a taillight. So they replaced the standard taillight units with a very small lens. That small lens basically being probably from a trailer or from some other vehicle. We haven't been able to determine what the taillight lenses are from. But the other 2 taillight holes are left open, and we surmise that that was left open in order to allow the exit of air that might be trapped under the back of this unique shape of the Corvette body. The underside of the rear of the car has an aluminum belly pan on it to prevent air from going up in the back, but we still anticipate that certain air was going to be embodied in there, and it was going to need to escape so that they could maintain the high speed. So the NASCAR portion of this car's life is just the beginning. While it was created and single purpose built, the car ended up having a second life and even a third life. The car, after it was finished, they removed the motor, they took off the special 6-lug front wheels, they put standard brakes back on it, they put standard equipment back on it. After they'd cut the wheel wells out, they brought the car back to California, sold it to a sports car racer. He ended up gluing fender panels back in it painting it again, left it silver, left it number 3, and put a 327 engine in it and began to sports car race in Southern California. It raced and won in 1963 at the newly formed Dodger Stadium road race. It raced and won at the USRRC in Northern California. It raced in the Los Angeles Times Grand Prix in 1963 and in 1964, and with various drivers, which you would know, Billy Krause, Doug Hooper, and Dick Goldstrand. Those 3 guys traded use of this car, took it all the way north to Kent, Washington, Portland, Oregon, Cotati in Northern California, Laguna Seca, and Riverside Raceway. So the car has been a lot of places and did a lot of things. At the end of the year 1963, they wanted the car to look like a new car, and so as it started to perform in 1964 with the same team of drivers, they changed certain things to accommodate its appearance. They changed the rocker panel. They put on a 1964 rocker panel. They put on a 1964 hood, and they put on the 1964 vents. In fact, it's painted a 1964 color as well. The car is currently used in road racing in 327 form, which is the same way that it was seen in 1963 and 1964.